Thank you for coming to this study group, Street Epistemology. Today is book club. We are going over chapter 6 of How to Have Impossible Conversations by Drs. Peter Boghossian and James Lindsay. This book club is for people who have read the book and for people who have not read the book. It's by people who have read the book. Mostly that people is myself and Gigi, who have done the summary that you're going to hear today. Hopefully with a 10% of the word count, about 30% of the useful information in the book. That's what we're trying for. We'll see if we succeed. In chapter 6, we cover 6 expert skills to engage closed mind. We'll cover synthesis. This is how to modify your own views. We'll look at how to help somebody vent steam, literally steam, but help somebody vent their emotional pressures and things. We'll go over ultracasting, how to create the conversation partner. We'll cover hostage negotiations, that is, de-escalating. We will probe the limits, explore the extremes of people's views. And at the end, we'll go over counter-intervention strategies. What if somebody's trying to push it back on you? Synthesis is a fancy-sounding word for strengthening your own views and having more true and accurate beliefs by receiving feedback from opposing viewpoints. Achieving synthesis is in 5 easy steps, according to the book. 1, present your idea. Offer your own ideas, either when asked by a partner or just presenting an idea you would like to polish. 2, invite and listen to counter-arguments. Ask your partner what they think and listen to the countering ideas that they present. This one is a bit harder and can make one feel intellectually inadequate when you find that you might be wrong. You really have to get your ego out of this one, or else you'll end up doubling down and becoming very firm on it. Employ the counter-arguments in order to make disconfirmation criteria. By using what they say, figure out what it would take for you to be incorrect in your position. If your partner suggests ways that you might be inaccurate, consider them. They might be thinking about something you're not. Ask for specific examples that might lead you away from your position. That way you would be able to recognize data that should disconfirm your position should it come along. And then disconfirm in order to modify your own position. Use what you've learned about what kind of things should disconfirm you. See if you find them. Position. And repeat the process with a different opinion or with the same opinion. You might go through several iterations on this, several people about it. A little bit, this is sort of like the scientific action. So in this disconfirmation criteria, I'll ask anybody who's willing to answer. Let's everybody. So if anybody would like to speak back to me on this, I'll make a claim. Myself back on. I think energy density in batteries is the next big leap to make, say, electric cars better. And I wonder if I could use a powerful hydraulic press in order to squeeze the cells into a higher density. Does anybody have any feedback on that idea with me? Please unmute and speak up. What I want to do here is have an idea. Hopefully you might recognize that the idea is a bit half-baked, and see if anybody can give me disconfirmation criteria regarding this idea that I could use to come up with maybe a better approach. Go ahead. Ivy, yes, go ahead. Does anybody have any feedback on whether I could increase energy density in batteries using a hydraulic press to make it denser? Nobody. Maybe that people are struggling to unmute and I can't figure out how to make it easy for them. Yeah.
I'm going with no.
You're going with no. All right then. That's fine. We can skip this one. I was going to roll a nice little D10 dice to give you a politeness scale, but that's all right. The next section in the book: help vent steam. There will be times when a friend or conversation partner is experiencing strong emotions that leak into the conversation. In these instances, it's best to pause and let them get their thoughts and feelings off their chest. Ask questions that encourage the person to keep talking, express their feelings. Things like, tell me more, and how does that make you feel, are good ways to help start that conversation, keep the ball rolling. You have to listen a lot. If they are talking 50% of the time, you're talking too much. This might be you're talking 10% of the time, might be your goal. Acknowledge their feelings by repeating them back to your partner. This should be that 10 or 20% should be you acknowledging their feeling, acknowledging their disruption, their stress. Pause and give them time. No need to have something to say as soon as there's quiet. It's okay. Listen even more. You can deepen and extend a conversation with things like, how does that work? Or ask them to give a lot of details, especially about how they're feeling about it. Because the stress isn't about, gosh, I can't get this nut to fit on this bolt. This is something inside them, inside their own cognitive dissonance, or if they're having some strong emotional reaction somebody's doing, then let them complain about it a bit. It's fine. It's okay to offer help if your help is useful. Sometimes they might be complaining about something you have no input in at all, and then there's nothing really to offer. And the offer of help is only if it's a genuine, real kind of thing, only if you're actually wanting to do that. It's okay to offer help. It is not required that you offer. When your friend has finished venting, let the conversation. Don't force the conversation to be more than is helpful. Let their needs define how far you go. And give yourself and your partner time to process the venting. So I have another exercise to offer. We'll see if anybody wants. I'd like to open the room, and I'm going to vent for a few minutes, and then I'd like the audience to mirror back what you understood I am venting about. Are people into that? If not, I probably don't want to just do an example for a few minutes and then have no response.
I'll try.
Okay.
I would like to too.
Good. Then I'd like both of you to respond with how you would deal with whether I'm venting. So I'm so frustrated. It just makes me so. Graveyard shift's really getting to me.
Could you repeat what's getting to you?
Graveyard shift.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, working late nights has become rather frustrating for you.
Yeah. All of the guys on great, they're just mean. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that your coworkers have been mean.
Okay, good. Yeah. It's just with that fish in the microwave. You've ever had fish in the microwave? Just ruins it for everybody else, makes the whole place stink. I can't believe these graveyard shifters are just so discourteous.
I certainly understand where you're coming from. I've had coworkers that have done the same with me at a call center.
Oh boy, a whole call center. That must be really terrible with the fish smell all the way through. Ah,
Oh, absolutely. It was plain awful.
yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. That was exercise. Next part of the book, ultracasting. I have a personal note at the end. Ultracasting was introduced in 1963 by sociologists Eugene Weinstein and Paul Duisberger. I hope I'm saying that. It's a technique used to convince people by casting people in a particular role, and then based on that, encouraging the person to behave in a particular way. I suppose I'm doing that when I'm asking for exercises here. I'm saying, hey, would you play the role of the thing? And ultracasting is a little further than that. The example in the book given is nurses encourage a patient back to bed by saying what a person in his condition should be doing instead of telling him what to do. So if they say, go back to bed, they go, I don't want to be in bed. And instead you say, if you were taking care of somebody in your condition, what would your advice be about getting around to bed? That kind of thing. Put them in charge of the role. It's a bit like asking them to role play the position. It is strangely effective to ask people to role play a position and then have them do that thing. They will think they're better at it just because they're trying. Oftentimes this will happen because somebody says, I have this solution, I have this position. And sometimes their position is very one-sided or can't work the way it's directly said. So you might say, all right, so imagine you are an expert on the committee designed to perform this thing for which you have a position. I'm being very vague here. I don't have one specifically. And say, so you're an expert on this thing, but the other members of the committee are being extremely stubborn and they won't do it exactly the way you had said before. They have already voted down your position. What would be the next best thing? And that's a way into getting people to think about alternatives, think about compromise.
So is
So
that like
this is a
putting
way.
them in a future role kind of thing, where it's like
Yeah.
you're still where you are, but now you're in a different future
Yeah.
potential outcome?
Yeah. It's very much a hypothetical. You say, if you were on the committee designed to do this, they say, oh, the Senate should do this. Well, okay, if you were a senator, what would you do? That kind of exactly that. So this is a way to get somebody off a very specific position onto looking at alternatives. You could ultracast in praise of conversational virtue, do lots of rapport, and then cast them as someone, hey, you're good at communication. What would be the thing you would say how to communicate through this kind of thing? Okay, I have some personal notes on ultracasting. I find this thing to be crazy effective with people. And I really dislike using it. It makes my teeth itch. It really bugs me. And it's a personal history thing. I grew up in a fundamentalist missionary school. They weaponized ultracasting to the point where it was damaging. They used this method along with several other very high pressure social methods to have people working completely against their own interests and ignoring their own self-care.
Could you give an example of how they would use it?
Yeah, sure. So you're a student of God's word and you would know that the result is the such and such. What do you think would be the way you should teach this other person to get back on the right path? And how much time would you say a person should put into the ministry, given that people's souls are at stake? Stuff like that, where they would be encouraging people using very high pressure tactics to go against their own self-care. That kind of. Anyway, so I really, really dislike ultracasting, and so I am quite confused as to whether it's good or bad, whether it's ethical, because to me it smells so bad I don't want to have anything to do with it. Does anybody else have experience with these kinds of ultracasting techniques and would be willing to share them, maybe positive or negative experiences? And does anybody have any commentary on the ethics of asking somebody to play a role in order to very effectively shift their attitude?
It sounds to me a little bit like the golden rule, where it's like, what would you do if you were in their shoes, kind of thing, and that it becomes
Mm-hmm.
unethical when you start changing reality for the thing, where it's like, hey, what would you do if you were this person? Seems fine, but what would you do if you were this person and also they're about to be killed by this terrorist, and also we don't like terrorists? How do you feel about the that kind of thing, where you start like adding
Okay.
more and more really dangerous and intimidating language outside of how would you do if you were this person? Like forcing them to
Okay.
do something they don't want to do through the scenario.
Yeah. And in the example I'm giving in the missionary school, whatever their answer is going to be, if it's acceptable, will be the one accepted as their answer to what they will do. So there's not the actual protection of the hypothetical there. Yeah. Okay. Does anybody else have any comments on this one?
Are you saying it's so unethical that it causes people to act against their interests? Therefore, that's what makes it unethical. That it's so persuasive that they act against their own interests. It's like too effective.
That's where I think it can become unethical, is because it is so effective that it is a manipulation that people aren't equipped to recognize, aren't equipped to deal with.
Do you think it forces people to act against their interests?
For 10 to 20% of the population, yes, I think so.
So if
I think
was
most
done
of us
in a
have a
less,
resistance against it, so we don't. But those that do, we shouldn't use it on them. I mean, I'm talking about in the extreme cases in the missionary school. I am very ambivalent about whether it's ethical within SE, because within SE, I do have several other protections, like the hypothetical really is hypothetical, and I'm not going to hold you to what you say, things like that.
So if it was done in a more moderate way or sort of a light way, that would make it more ethical?
For me, yes. Yeah. I'm really clear that I'm so biased that I can't tell what the ethics are. So I'm very interested in what how other people see the ethics of it.
Do you think you could come up with like a pre-phrase before using it that would make it ethical? Like, hey, if this makes you uncomfortable, please don't answer it. Like something like that, where you could say it before it, that would make it consistently ethical every time you asked.
Yes. I want to say this is purely hypothetical, and I'm not going to hold you to your answers. I'm not going to call you on it if you do something different than what you say here. I don't want you to take the results of this as any pressure toward what you should do. It's just exploring an idea. Then it feels pretty okay to me.
Okay.
I'm a little bit perplexed, because if you're asking somebody to take on a role of someone who is clearly not them, and that this hypothetical other person does something that's against their interests, it's not their action; it's the action of this hypothetical person that they're playing a role for. So I'm a little confused by that.
Yeah, in the case of the missionary school, it was not hypothetical. It was, I believe you are a good student of the Bible, and as a good student of the Bible, what would you say? Da, da, da. So it's not hypothetical in the way they're treating it. They're casting them in the role and then holding them to it. So
Yeah, they're taking advantage
I think, is
of
what
their
makes it okay.
willingness to play that role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're taking advantage of their willingness to play the role, and that they are crossing the line between hypothetical imaginings and real, and it's not really clear for them that they don't have to be held to it.
I think I could think of another bad example, which would be like you have a
Yes.
kid that did something, and it's like, okay, you're a
Mhm.
bad kid. As a bad kid, what should happen to you,
Oh.
kind of thing. Like that would be.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I think I've like
And I
seen
had
that
one.
happen. Yeah.
Oh, I had that a lot. Oh. Now I'm gonna have PTSD. Oh, it's so on the nose. Okay, I'm gonna try not to react to that, and we'll move on to the next one. If nobody has any further comments on altered casting, is there any more? I don't want to cut people off. Okay. Hostage negotiations. These are very tense and dangerous situations. We hope we never have to use these techniques in those kinds of. Hopefully, in SE, there's nothing dangerous going on. There are still things we can learn from them in our difficult conversation. One is minimal encourager. Simple words like, yeah, I see, and okay are easy ways to let your interlocutor know that you're still listening. But you're not necessarily encouraging them or taking them in a particular direction or putting, as they say, minimal encourager. These are helpful in tense moments and situations because as long as somebody's being heard, they tend to escalate less. Like that. The next is mirroring. That's something we do a lot. In this method, you repeat back the last few words of what someone said. Might literally be the last few words of their sentence and have them confirm it. Other kinds of mirroring might be in your own words, describing what it is you understood that they want or need. If someone says, I'm just so sick and tired of these people pushing everyone around and trying to get their own, you say, get their own way. Literally just taking the last few words of something can have somebody potentially expand on what's an important. Hostage negotiations experts McMains and Mullins provide the following example. A trapped armed robber in a bank might say, I have to get out of here with the money. It's for my kid. It's not for me. A good mirroring response would be, for your kid? To which the robber might say, yeah, he's got a fever and an infection. I don't have money for the pills he's supposed to take. He needs the money for the pills. So the idea here was to just get more detail, hear more about the. A bad mirroring response would be, you expect me to believe it's not for you? That sort of challenging doesn't help. Won't help at all. You want to repeat the last few words they said to show that you're hearing what they're listening. Not necessarily agreeing, you're just asking further questions, and you're not fighting them or challenging that they are wrong. In the book, they note, don't you overuse mirroring, even though it shows you're paying attention. The authors prefer no more than 4 or 5 times in a 7-minute conversation. That's specific time, 7 minutes. Okay, I've had some experience in this one. Given that one of the authors is a professor of epistemology and deals with students on the questions like this on a constant basis, he might even have a format. He's not really sure. Emotional labeling. You are giving a name to what someone else is feeling, similar to helping someone vent, except that you are offering a label for their feeling instead of coming up with a description together. It can be used to diffuse strong emotions in normal people in crisis, feeling less than or borderline or likely to harm themselves. An example from the book is a woman who was angry about her husband wanting to leave her for another woman and said, I have 2 adulterous SOBs in here and I'm going to make them pay. No one should ever get away with hurting other people this way. They are going to know what it's like. A good emotional label would be something like, you sound pretty hurt about being left. This doesn't seem fair. This recognizes feelings without judging. Be careful about using emotional labeling. This is helpful if you have an empathetic capacity, but there is also a big risk of mislabeling your partner's feelings. You don't, and they might think you're not understanding. If you call them on the wrong labels, that can be damaging by themselves. Also, the word anger sometimes is a trigger for anger. So frustration, difficulty, friction, those kinds of terms might be better. Save face, build golden bridges, as we talked about in prior chapters. Let them maintain their positive reputation. Acknowledge a complex and difficult situation for what it is. If you make them have to admit to something bad in order to comply with you, you are less likely to get compliance. That's simple.
Okay.
This was happening on Monday too. I think he'll be back in like maybe a minute or so.
I think he has to reboot, right?
Quick, someone take ownership of the room before he comes back.
Let me reset. Am I working live? Okay, seems like it's good. This would be like defining the roles of individual parts of the problem of assisted suicide or death with dignity, the authors suggest. They would first define the role of the doctor and the decision to end life, and then distinguish that from the role of the state by asking questions. And there's different components of it. Talk about each one of them separately, and you might be able to make progress somewhere. Sometimes an anecdote is better than data. A really great Veritasium video on this one. I will try to look it up and include it in the text. About that, while those of us who understand statistics and studies and those kinds of things and how science works, we're much more compelled by data. Really, people are compelled by stories. Individual cases where something was the case. We understand things that way, and it's odd to train the mind to ignore those individual stories and look at the overall data. So many times when you're speaking to somebody, a story is just going to be more effective than, yes, but the statistical mean shows the thing and it was a large N. Okay. Hostage negotiations isn't something I want to try to have people learning street epistemology try to even practice. These are high pressure situations, and I would think we would actually only run into them in a place where we didn't have an easy abort. Most of the time, if we're getting into a high pressure kind of conversation, the street epistemologist is going to say, "Thank you for your time. I'd like to maybe talk to you again." And most of the time we set up an environment where that's the case. These hostage negotiations kinds of tactics are there for you found yourself where you don't really have the back out option, which is certainly not ordinary SE. So I really think it's part of SE planning practice, kind of the advanced class. So the next part of the book, probe the limit. Some people will not listen to you for the simple reason that you are in a group they disagree with. The thing you're already used to shooting your own messengers. You can still have an otherwise impossible conversation with them without them taking your word on anything. If you're here to be completely neutral, you could be actually of the group that they don't trust. And they could still have a conversation with you because you're asking questions and you're not fighting for a position. So they don't have a reason to reject what you say yet. Let them teach you all the things that they want to teach that unteachable group. Remember that you can learn all about it without changing your confidence about that thing. You could learn every argument that a flat earther has, and you'll probably not be swayed that the earth is not round. Don't stress about it. It's okay. The example in the book is the blanket distrust of a specific intersection of sexual orientation, race, and gender. The authors see this as an impractical blanket distrust and something that is only said for effect, not actually lived by. They call this a disingenuous statement. If you unmask a disingenuous statement, the first thing to do is to mirror and confirm. Do you really mean that this combined with this always has this result? Be prepared to find that they don't mean that, or they won't confirm their generalization when it is spelled out clearly. That's totally okay. Let them off the hook if they don't confirm. We are not playing for points here. We are really trying to generously understand, be kind, that kind of thing. If somebody says something completely daft, but then they back off of it, don't chase it. Let it go. If you do find that this is a gross generalization, ask how long they've held the belief. If this is something that they have somewhat recently or a few years had the belief, it might be a good time to ask what they changed their mind about around the same time. When somebody has a significant change of belief, especially to a grossly generalized, there's often other ideas that came along with it at the same time. That can help you to learn how they came to their belief. Learning how they came to their belief is very much like the regular SE practice. Unless you are actually in the outgroup that they are throwing out. If I'm speaking to somebody who's very conservative, they might look at me as a lefty liberal loony. I think the term is lib. Anyway, the point is, they might have lots of ideas about me, and this is when I'm going to get a lot of extra practice shooting my messengers and growing a thick skin, because there's probably going to be a whole bunch of stuff coming at me, and if I just like, okay, you may be right, I'll think about that, those kind of things. You don't have to give back much. You don't have to agree, but you don't either have to react. Probe the limits of the belief. With any generalization, distinctions can be made in the hypothetical extreme. Even the admission of significant exceptions to the generalization might actually be progress in a particular case. So don't go in there with a goal that you're definitely going to get to, but can if they even just define it more loosely, that might change their mind a little bit when they're thinking strong absolutes. Look for conditions where they might act outside the belief. If they say, I completely won't have anything to do with this group of people, you might find that they don't check for that group of people when they're checking out of the grocery store. And they might well interact with people that are in that group. Who knows? Your money could have been handled by a Nazi. It's possible. So if I were to say to you, this is the exercise part, if I were to say to you, I believe that if a person has not read at least a third of Robert Heinlein's collected works, they are uncultured, uneducated, and probably incapable of critical thinking, and it will gain me nothing at all by having any conversation with them. Does anybody have any feedback to that idea? I think that would be an example of one of those in disingenuous statements. And you might be able to find situations where I am, in fact, having productive conversations with people for whom I have no idea whether they have read any Robert Heinlein. And that might help you find an exception to my rule.
So I guess maybe I would ask, like, oh, who are people that you respect the opinion of? Some public figures?
Ooh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, and then find out whether they likely have read enough Heinlein that I would qualify them.
Or if they just don't speak English, maybe. I guess, I mean, it could be
That's
translated.
another good point. Yes. Yeah. How do you feel about Gandhi? He never read Heinlein. Or maybe not. Yeah, indeed. The next section of the book, counter-intervention strategies. Okay. Here we go. If someone attempts to instill doubt in you, they want to turn the tables of SE on you. You have roughly 3 choices. You can just go with it, try it on, see if you have doubt, see if you should have doubt. I like that, by the way, a lot. You could refuse to play. You can withdraw consent. You are not required to stay in the conversation. You could just say, nah, I don't want to have that conversation, and back out, do something else. Or you could use counter interventions. These are all dishonest. These are all not recommended by me or the authors of the book, but they are fun to note when you can see them. It's really good to being open to changing your mind in street epistemology, and you might even learn a new technique if they don't move you. If you can just go with it, you might learn a new way to do SE. You might learn a new approach, whether or not you're moved by their attempt. So, stonewalling Socrates. Street epistemology is a both sides optic. Anytime you don't want to answer a question, just don't. It might mean the end of the conversation, or maybe they will try a different tack, more to your liking. Now, here's the counter-intervention techniques. Gigi writes that similar ideas to the counter-intervention techniques that are found in the Orange Book were also put out on my satirical blog post, How to Defeat Street Epistemology. That's in the document. Somebody share the document. If my production team would be so kind as to throw the appropriate links to the document I'm reading from, plus also that How to Defeat Street Epistemology document, the blog. I did a similar thing in this blog where I wrote a bunch of counter-intervention strategies, only one of which is actually duplicated from. Fake confidence. You could say you are a lot more sure or a lot less sure than you actually are. You might actually even say that you're sure of its opposition. Obviously, people are going to have a hard time convincing you of anything if you are not honest about what you're saying. If you're going to lie, I mean, why quibble over something like just a little tiny lie? No, go for the big one, maybe. You could fake a change of mind. Thank you, Gigi. You could fake a change of mind. Oh yeah, you've convinced me. Sure. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. You must be. That was a little too obviously sarcastic. But if you do fake a change of mind, it will give them such a thrill. It'll be quite fun for them. You could doubt your doubt. You could say, I thought I had my doubt calibrated. Now I'm uncertain that I should even doubt, and so on. And therefore, by adding doubt, actually increase your certainty, ironically. This can get them completely lost in meta levels, trying to define what it is you're actually talking about. You could claim moral ambivalence. You could say, I don't really care. I'm not sure. Don't think, doesn't really matter whether you torture your puppies or not to me, something like that. I don't know why I should care about your conclusion or even think about it. If you don't care, what does it matter? If they go fast, take pauses. Slow the conversation down. I hardly think that that's a counter-intervention technique. I think that that's just normal. We sped up. Question their questions. So, you ever had somebody who will never answer a question? They will only answer a question with a question, and oftentimes it's a meta question about your question. Oh, just you can keep going down that little road forever. This one is really good for damaging rapport if you're pushing hard. So you can really ruin somebody's opinion of you by being unwilling to ever answer a straight question. And then you could, in fact, intentionally damage rapport. You could just do those things that you've been avoiding doing all this time. You could say, "Why, you rascally wabbit," or other sort of maybe stronger words. You could directly insult them. You could like get directly angry at them and that sort of thing. That usually works to get people to stop talking. If you need examples of how to intentionally damage rapport, I hear Twitter is a good place to find those things. You could invent ad hoc epistemology. So you could make it up as you go along. Anything goes. You could just say, "Oh, well, I'm certain of this, and therefore I can do this, and because peanut butter, my mother was the queen." Just silly, whatever. And be honest, you've seen worse epistemologies than what your untrained imagination can manage to dump out on the carpet. If you are not used to really arguing for extreme positions, your epistemologies will probably seem quite sane compared to extreme apologists for any direction. Ooh, you could redefine common terms to disallow defeasors. You could say that this thing that we're talking about completely excludes this other entire area because it goes against my position. I bet several of you are already thinking of examples. Keep them to yourself. We don't want to wedge it up in here. You could ask for impractical disconfirmation criteria. What I mean is, the classic example is, what would make you disbelieve the resurrection of Jesus? Well, the bones of Jesus with DNA evidence to prove that they're not someone else's bones. That's one of those examples where the proof is not even possible. When asking for impractical disconfirmation criteria, you get extra points if they actually facepalm. Truth relativism. Well, this is a great way out. You can get out of anything with truth relativism. Well, that's just your opinion. We only ever perceive anything through the flawed model in our heads, through our flawed senses. You should not be so sure you know anything for certain. So if you want to get out of being ever pinned down, just say, "True for me." You know, how can you tell whose truth is the best truth? Back to the tic-tac test. You could claim a change of belief more than once in the conversation. So you could shift from this place to that place, maybe back, maybe to someplace else. Oh, it's very fun. And bonus points, if you never acknowledge that you're actually changing your position, you just speak to the new one and to the new one and to the drive them bananas. So for bonus points, you do not have to obviously realize that you have changed your position. You could feign radical domain-specific ignorance. You could pretend not to know about something completely obvious in order to not have somebody pin you down on something. I bet this goes against rapport. This is just nuts. I quote, "What do you mean you buy your meat from stores? I asked you if you have to kill to eat meat, and you are just introducing complexity into the hypothetical? What is this about stores?" The preceding was a quote from an Essie Alinkus from about a month ago that I had with someone on a Discord. and it was paraphrased to reduce the. So those are a goodly list of ways in which you could avoid the method of allowing anybody to modify your beliefs. You could just fail to cooperate with the method in all sorts of bad, nasty ways. We hope you'll never do that, SE. Really? No, we don't want you to do that. I think it's a nifty way for the authors to get those examples into the book without just painting the interlocutors with doing it. I suspect if you've done SE for any significant time, by the time you've done 10 or 20 different interlocutors, you probably will have seen several examples of these kind of tactics in not going with the potential believer. Okay. Very good. So my recommendation is just go with it. Be convincible. In conclusion, this chapter has been mostly about engaging with the closed-minded. The best thing in those cases is practice patience. There are lots of techniques in here that get you out of the edges, but the main thing that's going to make your SE easier with some of the hardest people to work with is just practice and patience. I don't want to encourage anyone to get good at any of these deceptive tactics, so I won't ask anyone to model them specifically. I open the room for any feedback on anywhere in this chapter. I'm happy to role play with anyone if they want something. My presentation's done for. I open it to the room. Anybody have any thoughts? Feedback?
I think on the
I hear
last thing you said
Go ahead.
with
Yes.
how you don't want people to get good at those tactics.
Yeah.
I think I would disagree with that. I think that
Okay.
it's I don't know. I don't think that getting good at tactics that are harmful is necessarily a harmful thing, because the better you
Agreed.
get at imitating them or experiencing them, the better you get at recognizing them and avoiding them.
Okay. Let me say it this way. I wouldn't be sad if somebody got okay at those things, got good at those things. I wouldn't want to put any effort into it in a training class for SE. I wouldn't want to give it any time in an SE class. If somebody wants to do it for other kind of fun, great. I love Steelman. I love giving the counter demonstrations. I do that all the time. So I suppose I've been happy that I have learned to do these things, and hopefully only for the purpose of demonstration.
Is it really that disingenuous to play ignorant?
Is it disingenuous to play ignorant? Yeah, I don't actually like that they call these disingenuous tactics. I disagree with the authors on the word disingenuous here. I think there's be much better words for this, because I think several of the tactics are completely honest. Like, I mean, feigning ridiculous ignorance, like I don't know what a store is where you can buy meat, was the example in the case, was ridiculous. But so, okay. So you give me a ridiculous thing to work with. That doesn't bother me. Or it shouldn't. Well, thank you for coming to this book club. This is session 5 out of 6, and it was chapter 6 out of 7 because we folded chapter 1, which is really an introduction into chapter 2. Next week, we will cover chapter 7, the last, and that's about dealing with ideologues, the most extreme, advanced SE, dealing with the strong ideologue, the person who says 101%. So that'll be chapter 7 next week. So thank you all for coming to this book club. Here are 5 of my favorite SE specific channels. That's one of a list of more than a dozen that are on my on the YouTube channel, where it's under promoted channels. If you really like SE, that's a good place to go find more SE. There's really good stuff out there. There's also, on streetepistemology.com, a video of the month and access to get to the Street Epistemology channel, where they have a playlist, a YouTube playlist of essentially all the new Street Epistemology videos that come out every 50 days. I forget. The list is getting kind of long because there's a whole bunch of people coming out now. I'm so excited about the new Street Epistemology channels, and you can get to them through streetepistemology.com. And you can get to the Discord where we do this, and we can get to the Facebook group. And all of this is brought to you by Street Epistemology International. Thank you for coming to this study group SE. If you would like to be a guest on my show, on this or any of the other of my 8 categories that I have, they're all about street. I would only ask that you be polite, articulate, show your face, and stay on a topic related to SE, and I'm sure I can find a category to fit you in and schedule you up. And in that case, I look forward to hearing.